right, am I on? Okay. Oh, there's a beagle on the back. Not as hot anymore, but still good. All right, the life of Krishna continuing on. And remember, Krishna, there was an evil king, Kamsa. Krishna was prophesied to be born and kill him. He tried to kill Kamsa. He tried to prevent the birth of Krishna. He tried to, basically, he was the eighth child. The eighth child of this couple would kill Kamsa, so he killed all the previous children, put the parents in jail, chained up apart so they couldn't even make a new baby, but somehow they, the spirit of Vishnu came through, conceived the child in the mother, and then the baby Krishna was switched with another baby, and Krishna's being raised by the foster mom, although she doesn't know she's not Krishna's mother. She's her name is Yashoda, and and so there we are. And demons have showed up to try and stop Krishna, and Krishna has thwarted them. So go back to the past videos if you want to get the whole story. It's a good story. So here we are. We're in chapter 5, Bondage of the Boundless. And it begins with a little section of poetry that says, Damodara, thou abode of good qualities. Govinda, what the beautiful lotus like with a beautiful Govinda with the beautiful lotus like face. Do thou churn the sea of mortality with Mount Mandara and bestow on me a little of that immortal nectar. And Govinda is another name for Krishna. I think it refers to his life as a cow herder, as a cowboy. One day Yashoda got up early to assist the maids in churning curds. Like their whole life, besides being about cows, seems to be about making butter, and and it's just very dairy based. Because remember the last chapter was all about Krishna stealing butter, giving it to the cats and the monkeys, but always stealing butter and playing pranks. So one day Yashoda got up early to assist the maids in churning curds. She left the sleeping Krishna and tiptoed out of the room to boil the milk and churn the curds before he woke up. It so happened that he woke up soon after and was quite annoyed to find her missing. Even though he was about 3 years old, according to the custom, he had not yet been weaned, and it was his usual habit to have a good feast as soon as he got up. He shouted for his mother, but the noise made the wooden churn, as well. Oh, he shouted for his mother, but the noise made by the wooden churn, as well as the fact that she was singing songs about him, drowned out his baby voice. By now he was thoroughly disgruntled and decided to go down and investigate. Ah, there she is, busy churning curd when she should be feeding me, he thought, as he spied her from the door. Running to her, he caught hold of the churning rod and put a stop to the whole operation. She turned to look at him. Her eyes melted with love, and her breasts started to flow of their own accord. He was such an enchanting sight. His bunch of curls with his bunch of curls was sprouting from the top of his head, where she had tied it the previous evening. But a single peacock feather stuck in the with a single peacock feather stuck in the middle. I'm reading. I butchered that. He His bunch of curls was sprouting from the top of his head where she had tied it the previous evening with a single peacock feather stuck in the middle. His eyes were smudged with collyrium something, due to the tears he had shed. And even now, one tear was precariously balanced on his lower lip, wondering whether to fall, loath to leave that lovely eye. His eyes were smudged with collyrium, due to the tears he had shed, and even now one tear precariously balanced on a lower lid, wondering whether to fall, loath to leave that lovely eye. His lips were pink, with the full lower lip thrust out in a delicious pout. She caught him to her in a tight embrace and loosed her garment. She started to feed him, Both mother and son were thoroughly enjoying this interlude. He sucked with gusto, and she watching with great tenderness. When suddenly she heard the hissing noise of the milk boiling over on the fire. Placing the child down on the floor, she ran to rescue the milk. Krishna was furious. His eyes became red and his lips trembled. It was bad enough to have been deprived of his pleasure in the morning, but this was the very limit. To be dumped like a sack of potatoes when he had not finished drinking his fill. He would show her. He took up the heavy wooden churn and brought it down with a bang on the mud pot containing the curd she had been churning. The buttermilk gushed out with a gurgle, and the blob of butter with a blob of butter in the middle. With make-believe tears in his eyes, he looked aghast at what he had done. Deciding that discretion was the better part of valor, he hurriedly trotted off on his chubby legs. At the door, he turned and looked back. The blob of butter looked too inviting. Moreover, he was still hungry. He trotted back, rescued the butter, and ran to the veranda where there was a big rice husking mortar. Seating himself precariously on the top of this, he proceeded to enjoy his stolen feast, throwing a few lumps to the kittens now and again. Yashoda returned after rescuing the milk and saw the mess he had made on the floor, but but the child there but of the child there was no sign. She tiptoed out and saw him sitting on the mortar, glancing here and there with the pretended fear of discovery writ large in his eyes. She approached him slowly from behind. Turning around, he caught sight of her, jumped down, and ran away, as in fear. She gave chase to him who cannot be caught, even in the mind of the meditating yogi, purified by austerity, crying and rubbing his eyes with buttery fingers, looking back anxiously at his mother, who was slowly catching up with him. He ran and hid behind the mortar. When she saw his fear, she threw away the stick. When she saw his fear, she threw away the stick she had been carrying and decided to tie him to the mortar. Quickly she returned with the longest and strongest piece of rope she could find. Creeping up to the stone, she suddenly threw it over him and said, "Now I'm going to tie you up." I'm having flashbacks because when I was 3 years old, I was getting in trouble and a babysitter tied me to a tree. So I relate to Krishna right here. At these words, the tufts of curls bobbed up and over the stone, followed by two anxious eyes, one tiny nose, and a pair of buttery lips, ending in a determined chin that lifted itself up and rested on top of the stone. "I'm going to tie you up," she repeated, hardening her heart against the plea in his enchanting look. His eyes looked down, but there was a mocking gleam in them. He was the unmanifest supreme, sporting as a human child, whom this gopi took to be her own son and was trying to fasten to a mortar. Determinedly, she wound the rope around his waist and found it short by 2 fingers. So she attached another rope and wound it twice around him and found it again short by 2 fingers. She attached another rope with the same result. Thus she exhausted all the ropes in the house, and still there was a shortage of 2 inches to complete its round. The other gopis who had come to watch the fun now began to laugh at Yashoda's predicament. As for her, she could not imagine what the matter was. She was still to learn the folly of trying to bind the one who was boundless. The mocking gleam was more pronounced, and the gopis started tittering amongst themselves and whispering, "She did not believe us when we told her, and see, now she herself is suffering." The poor mother was desperate. She cast an imploring look at her little son. Seeing the pathetic state of his perspiring mother, with hair disheveled and flowers falling, Krishna felt pity and allowed himself to be bound. Not even the gods could attain as much grace from him as he showed to this gopi. Not even the gods could attain as much grace from him as he showed to this gopi, his mother, for the rope of love is the only cord capable of binding the boundless. The rope of love is the only cord capable of binding the boundless. There's a song in there somewhere. Just you stay there, you naughty boy, she said sternly, as she bound him with ease, thereby hoping to convince the others that she was fully capable of punishing the little rogue. Everyone drifted away, leaving him alone. His mother also went inside after admonishing him once more. Luckily, he had thought of hiding some of the butter in the hole of the mortar. I think Krishna has an issue with butter, man. Luckily, he thought of hiding some butter in the hole of the mortar. He took it out and had a small feast, but soon became quite bored. What was he to do now, since he had given an unspoken promise to his mother to remain tied? Suddenly he spied a pair of gigantic trees in the distance. They were growing very close to each other. In fact, between them there was such a small gap that only a very small boy like him could manage to squeeze through. He was struck with a desire to put his theory to the test. Now was a good time as any. He set off at a brisk trot on his chubby legs, following by the grumbling, rumbling, pounding stone. In all his life, it had never been. In all its life, the stone, the it is the stone. In all its life, it had never been treated so ignominiously. It hardly befitted a stone of its dignity to be bouncing up and down in the wake of a small boy like this. Krishna had reached the trees and pressed with ease through the gap between them, thereby proving his point. But the poor stone got well and truly stuck. Krishna looked back and saw the impediment. 1, 2, 3, he said, giving a slight tug. Both the trees crashed to the ground with a horrendous noise. In their place stood two handsome celestials. They were the sons of Kubera, the god of wealth, who were known as Nalakubera and Maningriva. Nalakubera and Maningriva. They had been cursed by the sage Narada in order to curb their pride arising from the intoxication of wealth. The spell could only be lifted by the touch of the Lord, who had embarked on this particular game to fulfill the words of his devotee, Narada. With folded palms, they bowed low and extolled him. Bless us, O Lord, for we are the servants of your devotee Narada. It was by his blessing that we have this opportunity to see you. In the future, may our words be always devoted to the narration of your excellence. May our ears be always listening to the accounts of your deeds. May our hands be ever engaged in the performing work for your May our hands ever be engaged in performing work for your sake. May our minds ever rest in constant remembrance of your feet. May our heads always remain bowed in reverence before your temple, which is the whole universe. Hearing this, the Lord was pleased. He blessed them and sent them back to their abode in the Himalayas. Where are the Himalayas? The celestials rained flowers on him and addressed him with a new appellation, Damodara, the one with a rope around his waist. Damodara. Let's see if that actually has a definition. No. Hearing the terrific sound of the falling trees, Nanda and the Gopilas rushed to the place to find Krishna sitting happily on the mortar eating the small black berries from the trees. Nanda now proceeded to liberate him, who is capable of liberating all souls. Nanda now proceeded to liberate him, who is capable of liberating all souls. Yashoda anxiously inspected him for bruises, but could find none. Everyone commented on the miraculous way in which the child managed to escape from danger. Another day, when Krishna was toddling through the streets on another of his nefarious errands, he saw an old lady laboriously carrying a basket of fruit that she managed to collect from the forest. Give me some, he lisped, I lisp. He lisped, running to her and tugging at her garment. She looked at his angelic face and was lost. I generally sell my fruit in exchange for grain, but for you I'll give my whole hoard free, she said. Krishna, the bestower of the fruits of action to all, refused to take anything free. My father is very rich. He has plenty of grain. Come with me, and I'll give you as much as you wish, he said. So saying, he darted off like a blue arrow, and the woman labored after him. This way, oh, this way, that way. She saw flashes of blue, and soon came to his house. By this time, Krishna had darted inside, imperiously calling his mother to get the grain, but Yashoda had gone out for a visit. The house seemed deserted. What was he to do? Going inside, he grabbed as much grain as his little hands could hold, and with the greatest concentration, he walked with bated breath, gazing fixedly at his hands so as not even a single grain would fall. But despite his best efforts, all along the passage the grain slipped through his baby fingers. When he emptied the two fistfuls with a sigh of relief into her basket, it was doubtful whether there was more than 5 or 6 grains altogether. The child beamed with joy at his own efforts and looked happily at the old lady. She smiled tenderly at him and wiped the beads of perspiration from his forehead with her torn garment. After that, after that, then she sat down on the steps and made him sit in her lap. She took a fistful of berries from the basket and filled his cupped palms. 2 more were needed to fill them to the brim. She turned to search for 2 big berries to place on top, and when she looked around, his hands were empty. Once more she filled them, and once more the same thing happened. This kept on until the last berry in his mouth was and this kept on until the last berry was in his mouth and the basket was empty. Are you satisfied now, my precious? She inquired anxiously. He nodded, and he nodded his head vigorously, so that the bunch of curls bounced up and down. He could not speak, for his mouth was too full. Though she had received only a few grains in return for her entire store of fruit, the old lady's heart was filled with unspeakable joy. Lifting the empty basket onto her head, she walked forward with a lilt. She had hardly gone a few steps when she felt a great weight on her head and put the basket down. She found that it was filled with precious gems as big as the fruits. They sparkled in the sun, glistening and gleaming, some black like Krishna's eyes, winking at her in mischief, some blue like his body as he darted before her like a flame, some pink like his palms upturned to receive the fruit. Everywhere her poor old eyes were dazzled by glimpses of him among the gems. Nothing more of him could she see, but she did not mind, for inside her heart his form shone forever. Who can explain the Leela of this divine being who played Who can explain the Leela of this divine being who played these pranks on the delight of the simple cowherds of Gokula? Assuming the role of a village child, he sang and danced at the command of the gopis, as if he were a sort of puppet. He fetched and carried for them, played and pranced for them, and ran to do their bidding, to show that he was one who subordinates himself to fulfill even the slightest wish of his devotees. Well, that was unnecessary. Nanda and the other elders among the Gopas now started to feel alarmed at all the extraordinary happenings in their settlement and the number of miraculous escapes this child seemed to be having. They had a conference to decide what best could be done. An old man called Upananda, an old man called Upananda declared that there was some evil spirit in that place and that God alone had protected their child and kept him from harm. He suggested that it would be better to shift to a new place before any further calamity took place. The nearby forest of Vrindavana was noted for its beauty and had plenty of virgin pastures for the cows. This was an important point for them since they depended on their cows for their livelihood. All of them readily agreed to make the move, and they got their carts ready and started on the trek. The old men, the women, the children, and their possessions were loaded on the carts, and the cavalcade set forth with the cows marching in front, the carts following, and the men and the priests behind, the men carrying bows in their hands. How, how picturesque was the way, and how lovely the scene. The calves lowed softly as they ran to keep up with their mothers. The bells on the horns of the bulls tinkled merrily, keeping time with the bells on the wheels of the carts. The Gopulas blew their horns and trumpets, and the gopis sitting in their carts sang lyrics about the pranks of their beloved Krishna. Balarama and Krishna were seated in a cart on the laps of their mothers, and neither Yashoda nor Rohini felt the tediousness of the journey, listening to their prattle. They jolted along in the carts until the sun set in the west, and they reached the outskirts of Vrindavana, which was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. The prominent landmark of the Govardhana, hill loomed in the background. The river Kalindi, or Yamuna, was like a beautiful damsel rushing with delight to meet her lover, and the abundance of flowering trees and bushes drenched the air with their perfumes. They sat for some time, soaking in the charm of their first night in the forest of Vrindavana. Fortunate indeed was this place, where all the trees and every blade of grass must have been great sages in previous life, to have the good fortune to feel the divine feet of the Lord dancing over them, his lotus petal body brushing them, and his perfumed breath invigorating them. Since they were a nomadic tribe, used to the constant moves, the Gopas cleared the land and set up their dwelling places in no time. Small boys up to the age of 5 were allowed to tend the calves. Krishna begged his mother to be allowed to go with them. Reluctantly she agreed, for she could not bear to be parted from him. Her heart yearned after him, and her eyes followed him until he was no more than a small blue dot in the distance, with the morning sun creating a halo around his head from the dust raised by the hooves of the calves. All the boys carried their toys with them. Once they reached the grassy plain, they would allow the calves to graze while they amused themselves. Sometimes they played on flutes, sometimes with their catapults, sometimes with balls, sometimes with masks, some in masks and mock bullfights, bellowing like bulls and charging at each other. Thus he played with those fortunate Gopulas like an ordinary child. But while they were leading their idyllic existence in the forest, Kamsa was in a fever of impatience in Mathura. Kamsa remembers the evil king. So while they're having a good time off in this new place, Kamsa's still stewing in a fever of impatience in Mathura. The 3 demons he had sent to Gokula had never returned, so he strongly suspected that his enemy was hiding in the cowherd settlement, and he called his assistants and sent them to kill the boy Krishna, whom he suspected of being none other than his sister's son. One day, while Krishna was standing playing the flute, he spied a calf behaving in an extraordinary manner. It was one of Kamsa's assassins, who had taken on the calf's form in hope of remaining unnoticed. But the divine intelligence could never be baffled, and Krishna caught hold of the calf's hind legs and tail together, and whirled it round and round, and hurled it to the top of a tree. As a huge carcass of the demon came hurtling down, it brought down a number of fruits and flowers. Krishna continued his interrupted flute, playing while the other boys rushed to inspect what was happening. They saw the flowers and the fruits falling all around him and asked, "What happened, Krishna? From where have all these flowers and fruits come?" Krishna told them the story and showed them the body of the dead demon. One day, they went to take One day they went to the lake so that the calves could drink water. While they were drinking of the crystal clear waters of the lake, the boys were terrified to see a huge crane flapping its wings and advancing threatening toward them with parted beak. It was a demon called Baka, and it rushed at Krishna and swallowed him. The other boys were petrified and could do nothing, but the crane spat him out as fast as he had swallowed him, for it felt as if it had swallowed a live coal. So hot had the Lord's body become. Undaunted, it tried to pierce him with its sharp beak, but Krishna pried it open and tore it apart as Krishna pried it open and tore it apart as easily as one would split a blade of grass. The boys were filled with wonder and reported all the events of the day when they reached home. The elders listened to all these strange tales in glowing amazement and marveled at the prowess of this unique child in their midst. How happy were the years that Krishna and Balarama spent in the forest of Vrindavana with their companions. The weather never grew too hot in the summer, nor did the grass become dry. The trees were always laden with blossoms, and a gentle breeze blew over the foreheads of the boys. It must have been like Berkeley. In spring, they would play on the swings, or they would dance like peacocks, quack like ducks, leap over the streams like frogs, or make a ring to try and catch Krishna as he darted between their entwined arms. Even the animals had special love for him, and the cows lowed happily when he went near them and caressed them. Bedecked with garlands made of wild flowers, he would imitate the stately tread of the swans and the cries of birds. Sometimes tired after the bouts of boxing with his friends, he would rest his head on the bed of flowers. He would rest his head on a bed of flowers they made for him. In this way, hiding his identity by the power of his own Maya, and assuming the form of a common cowherd boy, he who was in reality the supreme divine lived a rustic's life amid the humble rural folk. But whatever he did to perfection, throwing himself heart and soul into the role he was enacting. The first creator, Brahma, knew the Supreme Person. He in turn made him known to Indra, king of the gods, for the benefit of all beings. Hence, even today, he who knows him and the creation thus, as pervaded and permeated and possessed by a Supreme Person, attains immortality. There is no other way for spiritual perfection. And that's from the Rig Veda. And he who works not for an earthly reward, but does the work to be done, he is the sannyasi. He is the yogi. Sannyasi is like a wandering monk. Let's just say that. He's a mendicant. So he who works not for earthly reward, but does the work to be done, he is the sannyasi. He is the yogi. He Not he who does not he who does not light the sacred fire, nor offers the holy sacrifice. He who works for he who works not. All right, so the true sannyasi is not one who lights the sacred fire nor makes the holy sacrifice, but one who does not work for earthly reward, but does the work that needs to be done. The sannyasi who renounces is also the karma yogi, the yoga of action, or one who does the yoga of action. The sannyasi who renounces is also the karma yogi. No one can be a yogi without surrendering his will. The mind is indeed restless, O Arjuna. It is indeed hard to train, but by constant practice and dispassion, it can be trained. When the mind is not in harmony, divine communion is hard to attain, but the man whose mind is in harmony attains it, provided he knows and strives. And that last part is from the Bhagavad Gita. And so ends the chapter with the words Hariom Tat Sat.